This is the Balance Dilemma. We tackle the often uniquely, but not always, female dilemma, managing life, work, family, and self. I'm Maura Carlin.
And I'm Christie Derrico. At the Balance Dilemma, we speak with women and men to hear their balanced stories. Our guests are entrepreneurs, reinventors, creators, executives, parents, and partners, telling us what we really want to know. How the heck did they manage that? And can you have it all and all at the same time?
A large part of the Balance Dilemma and our discussions here revolve around childcare. Who takes care of the children while parents work? And other than the emergency help provided during COVID, the United States is one of the few rich nations that does not provide childcare support. Not surprisingly, childcare is a major stressor for parents. Recent guest Lauren Tenenbaum, who counsels millennial mothers, says the childcare situation now is abysmal. On this episode, we're digging into the state of childcare with our guest, Tiffany Hamilton. She's the CEO of the YWCA, White Plains and Central Westchester. This YWCA is one of 225 affiliated associations across the United States, and they aim at enhancing the well-being of women and girls in Westchester County. And among its many initiatives is as a provider of childcare. So Tiffany is also a mother, a wife, and a DEI strategist. Tiffany, welcome to the Balance Dilemma. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here and looking forward to a great conversation.
We've been waiting for a long time to have this conversation. So let's start with the YWCA's childcare and why that's important to its mission.
It's deeply important because the first part of our mission is empowering women, right? And an empowered woman is one who answers the question around the balance dilemma, right? Can you work? Can you provide for your family? Can you be present for your community? So with our Children's Learning Center, we have an accessible and affordable option for a very, very expensive need for families. So we work with our young people from 8 weeks to 5 years of age. So we have families who bring multiple children into our Children's Learning Center just because, again, it's accessible but also affordable. The curriculum that we have is grounded in an anti-racist approach to exposing our young people to accepting and honoring different, acknowledging different, and celebrating the uniqueness of themselves at a very, very early age. And so when we think about our mission of empowering women, that happens when they have accessible and affordable childcare.
Right. And that's been proven with studies that bringing children together at a young age is the best way to fight things like racism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
go ahead, Christie.
You go ahead.
How many children are you able to serve?
So we serve about 110 families annually. So that can range from about 240 kids, or depending on the number of children per family, it could be about 110 children that we serve. But the numbers rotate regularly. I think it's important to share that when I joined the organization about a year and a half ago, we were running a universal pre-K in partnership with the school district. That has been a critical, I'll say, pain point for child care providers. Because of the structure, we did have to sunset our universal pre-K, and that was deeply impactful to those families. That was something I was not looking forward to. But when you have to be a steward of the resources, both financial and human, sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. And so we have been on the forefront advocating for universal pre-K partnerships at the state level, at the school district level, to ensure that they're balanced in a way that supports the entity providing the service, but also is accessible for families as well.
Yeah, universal pre-K has also been listed as an issue that drains childcare facilities since it's usually brought into school systems. So tell us about how the childcare works. What are your hours of operation? Are the children fed there? What's the curriculum?
Absolutely. So we have about, our operating hours are 7 a.m. to about 6 p.m. So we offer early drop-off. Our teachers get there about 7. I think early drop-off begins at 7:30 for those families that have to be at work at 8. And then we offer late pickup. We are in partnership with a nutritionist, and with the food that we provide comes through Wegmans. We did not want to do the heavily processed food. So those meals are prepared prepared fresh daily for our young people. And so we're super excited that we're offering that healthy option. And that's one of the things that we talk about, that this isn't just something coming out of the air fryer. It is prepared in partnership with a chef and a nutritionist. We also partner with other external organizations that bring in some of the extracurricular activities. So STEM-related activities, art-related activities. We have some young folks that receive services from speech-language pathologists. And it's almost as if, and I don't want to use this technical language because this isn't what we provide, but it's equivalent to an IEP, right?
Correct.
That individual education plan. And so if there is a young person that needs those supplementary services, we have practitioners that come in and provide that.
And you coordinate with the school district for those services.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
an interesting point, because oftentimes when you're in a private system, you can't rely on the resources from the school. They won't push in, so to speak, to provide that. So
Well, they refer you out to the school district
Correct.
who does the evaluation, and then you have to
Correct.
figure out how to get, and if you're at work, how do you get the services if you're not
Exactly.
driving
which
your
is
child?
another level of stress for parents to have to bring them to multiple places.
Absolutely. So when parents are looking to make those decisions, they're looking at the holistic approach, not just are you open during the time that I need, but what are the services that we offer? And so when you think about the services we're able to offer, in conjunction with being in a building that has aquatics and gymnastics and other children that they're being exposed to, that adds to the development and growth of those young folks because they see the possibilities outside of the classroom. And so our young people are moving through our building all day, accessing all of those resources and experiences.
Do you mostly draw from the immediate geographic area? Because somebody has to get their child there and pick them up.
Absolutely. So this is what I'll share. When I joined the organization about 1.5 years ago, I believe that data should drive and inform everything that we do. And I looked at the service area of families that we serve, and most of them are from the immediate area. But one thing that I noticed is that we didn't have a lot of families taking advantage of resources that they may be eligible for. So whether that's with DSS or scholarships that we offer. So we are beginning to market the Children's Learning Center so that more families know that there's an accessible and affordable option that may add 10 minutes to your commute, but you have the comfort in knowing that your child is in the care of a provider that is looking at the holistic development, the nutritional meals, the extracurricular activities. So right now,
one of the things I found so interesting that you said you talked about your curriculum. I think some people think of childcare as sort of just babysitting and sitting around. Can you just talk about what that means for such young kids? That it really is
absolutely
school.
It really is school. Our Children's Learning Center staff, some have their associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, some are completing their master's degrees. We're in partnership with higher education institutions, looking at our curriculum, ensuring that we're aligned with best practice. And when you think about early education, we have their lives in our hands every day at the most formative part of their life. And so you don't come into our Children's Learning Center and scroll on Instagram and Facebook. You are actively engaged with those young people from when they're dropped off to when they're picked up. And so we're looking at the psychosocial development, right? So how are you interacting with your peers? We provide that feedback to the parents so they know, what, Tiffany showed up and she was a little disengaged. So we sent her to musical munchkins to get her out of that, so knowing that you're sending your child to a space that it's not just about dropping off, but if they see something that's wrong, they're going to connect with the resource and the outlet.
Do you do potty training there, or do they have to come potty trained?
For our toddlers, they do have to come potty trained, but we have staff that if there are accidents, right, we know that those happen. I remember with my own child, it's like, okay, I thought we had this squared away at the house, but we did not.
Regression.
But the preference is that they are potty trained, but we also recognize because we serve them at such an early age that we may get them while they're in that season of potty training. And so our
There
staff
aren't many 8-week
Correct.
olds who are potty trained.
Correct. No. But when we get to that toddler stage, we offer some of that support as well.
So how do your clients, customers, parents, how do they get a spot? Is there a wait list?
Good question. The wait list does exist for our infants, and that's one thing that I noticed. Infant care is something that, there's a deep need for more providers in that particular space. So we have folks almost it feels like almost at the moment of conception that they get on our waiting list,
Right.
so that in 9 months, they have a spot to bring their child, because they know that their parental leave is limited. In the way that they've worked it out, we know at this starting point we will need support. So with our infant care, there's often a wait list. With our toddler care, depending on the age and the transition, there may or may not be a wait list, but we have openings now and we have qualified staff that are ready to welcome our young people. But what I recognize with what I believe to be a household name like the YWCA, people don't think Children's Learning Center. It's always gym and swim, right? Which we do very well, but we also do childcare well. So I'm delighted that we're in partnership with organizations like the Childcare Council, Westchester Children's Association, to get the word out that this affordable option exists.
I'm so glad you named both of those institutions, because for parents who want information, that's what they should Google. They have all the data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're looking for the data, but also the resources to support your child care needs, the Child Care Council of Westchester, Kathy Hallis, she is a godsend to this industry because she is deeply connected, but she's also the advocate, right? So when we talk about child care, the need, the deserts that exist, these are advocacy issues that as parents and civically engaged individuals, we should be talking about this in our communities and in our networks so that we can keep it in the forefront and on the minds of those who have the power to change.
And that's exactly what we want you to talk to us about now, this child care cliff that was anticipated when the federal funding from COVID expired. I think it was in the fall of 23. And they were anticipating, I think, like 5.2 million children losing their child care spots. And they were expecting, I think, almost 250,000 of child care providers to, employees or business owners to leave the business. What exactly are you seeing?
So we're seeing a little bit of both, right? We're seeing a continued growth in the need. And this is where data gets a bit tricky, because I know that I shared some information with you all from a presentation that Kathy shared with a group of us child care providers that the birthing rates are decreasing in the area, but yet there are a number of licensed seats, meaning the ratio is met per the state requirement and the provider has the appropriate credentials, but we have more children than we do licensed seats. And the challenge when childcare becomes limited and not affordable or accessible, people get creative. And that means young folks are not in environments where they're being stimulated through a curriculum. They're not being stimulated in an environment of their peers and learning collectively. So when we think about advocating around childcare, it's not just, we need more child care workers, but we also need local and state entities to invest in paying child care workers. Maybe one of the things we're advocating for is within the state of New York that there be health insurance provided for child care workers. When you think of the average hourly salary of a child care worker, it's almost impossible to afford health insurance.
What is it?
So many of our children's learning centers pay minimum wage. And minimum wage is around that $15, $16. But one of the things that we did in our first year was right-size all of our salaries so that our staff within our learning center, number one, they have a scale that if you have a high school diploma or associate's degree, you have this band, similar to kind of the corporate space, right? So we created bands, and if you weren't at the minimum in that band, we brought you up. So that was the commitment that we have made and will sustain. And so on average, you can have someone with a bachelor's degree making about $16 to $20 an hour. That's unheard of. And so we are committed to investing. And I will say in Westchester County and in New York State, we've done a good job in some of identifying some resources to provide bonuses for those folks. We just got the alert that New York State has identified some resources to where we can provide bonuses to our CLC learning staff. But that is, if you think about making $20 an hour, healthcare, and then you have your own children. So even with the deepest discounts that I'm able to offer, you're still paying almost 7% of your salary to childcare. So those are all things that we have to look at and try to
But that's
right-size.
interesting you're bringing this up, because it's not uncommon for industries that are heavily female, like waitressing and childcare, for there not to be health care provided. And it's a real issue, and I'm glad that you've earmarked it. And just going back to vocabulary, we like to educate people
Yes.
with these shows. Childcare deserts are, what are they? Tell us about it, because I read 64% of New Yorkers live in a childcare desert. What does that mean?
That pretty much says that within your geographic area, depending on sometimes it's a 5 to 10 mile radius, you don't have a certified child care provider in your network. And so if you think about not having state certified, because that's deeply important, though those state requirements are a little complex and make it difficult to keep the doors open, they're necessary. If you don't have a licensed child care provider within your service area, you now have to add to your commute. You now have to add to your transportation fee to get to that child care, the licensed child care provider. And then just because they're licensed, it doesn't mean that they're affordable, right? And so those are all components that go into choosing your child care provider.
What does it cost? Because we keep hearing how prohibitive the expense is.
So the weekly cost of childcare could be anywhere between $105 to $409.
What makes the difference?
So what makes the difference is probably the student-teacher ratio, the curriculum, the hours of operation, the number of seats available. But that roughly, and I just did it 52 weeks a year because not everyone takes vacations and takes time off. Our Children's Learning Center maybe closes less than 10 days a year because we know families have a need for
So you
that
cover
service.
those school vacations that drive parents crazy
Yes.
when
Correct.
they have to work.
When the school is closed, we're open. And so what that equates to about $7,000 to $20,000 a year for childcare, right?
For one child.
For one child. So if you add multiple children, you might save 10% with a discount for multiple children being in the system. But the federal government, Hudson Valley median earners pay about 13 to 15% of their income for one child. The data says the federal standard is to spend no more than 7% of your income on childcare. And so when you think about, I make $45,000 a year, right? If I make $45,000 a year, 10% of that is about $4,500.
Right.
And we already know that the minimum child care per year is at least $5,000. So that's basically me saying I just need to work for child care.
Well, you could do the math a little differently. If you're paying $300 a week and you're making minimum wage of around $15 an hour, you've worked your first 20 hours just to
for
pay for the
childcare.
child care.
Right.
That's right.
And to give
That's
it a
right.
little
And the taxes aren't
There we go.
calculated on that.
And the credit you get from the federal government on your tax return, I haven't looked at it in a number of years. It's not that much money compared to what we're talking about here. But I was looking at a forum called New York Mamas, and a parent wrote in. They said they were moving to Lower Westchester and was looking at costs for infant care. And they asked, is $2,500 a month reasonable, which is not the appropriate word to use here, for what the cost might be in Lower Westchester? And everyone chimed in, yes or more. And this person also wrote that none of the schools would list their pricing on the website, and we're not talking about the YWCA, we're talking about private infant care facilities. They wouldn't list the price, and they wouldn't tell over the phone, and they required people to come in and have a face-to-face in order to give them pricing, which to me smacks of gatekeeping. They want to look at who their potential customer is. And how do you feel about this?
I have lots of feelings, but I'll limit them to a few. When we think about the price for childcare, access to childcare, as a mother, that is a vulnerable space.
Yes.
Because you're looking to identify a place that you are trusting what you've created, and that child is with that center more than they are with you, right? 80% of their day will be spent in this facility. And so when an entity decides not to be transparent about the cost and very selective, or really try to get you in the door to see, it could very well mean that they want you to see it because we know that this is an emotional decision. And sometimes when we function in our feelings, we make decisions that may not match the resources we have at home. We may overcommit to a space. But what that also may say, that this entity may be more concerned about the look of who they serve versus the what of who they serve, the curriculum, the experience, and the success. And so we have to be very careful when we're engaging in that research process, because if they're not transparent up front, that may be a practice that they apply in other areas as well. The other piece that I will share with that is that we have to change the narrative around receiving support. Right? This is the balance dilemma, and we talk about whether or not women can have it all. I think it's also important for families to know it's okay to need support. Right? So what Westchester County did, they increased the range to be eligible for support for supplementing some of the child care expenses, right? And so we have to be okay with sharing that up front, that if this is your situation, we're here to support you with that. And if you're engaging with a provider that's not talking about the resources that are available to you, or not creating a space to support the vulnerability of saying, you know what, you all have a great curriculum. I love your staff. It's a bit costly. What do you have to offer? If they are not open with that, that says something about where their true commitment is.
Do you find parents reluctant to share that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it, they're embarrassed?
A part of it is
they feel like they're not supposed to? What do you think that comes from?
I will tell you, we've had college educated parents come in recognizing that childcare is expensive, and they don't tell us that they're struggling financially, but we're forward with the information. So, and the reason why I place the educational attainment in there, because sometimes when we think about supplementing human services, it may paint a certain picture in your mind, but the expensive cost of childcare is affecting more than just economically challenged families. We've got college educated families. We have folks that have the resources but still have a need. And so that's why DSS and I will share with you all the information, but for a family of 4, the cap is about, I think like $120,000 of the income that house could make in order to receive support. But we have families that don't meet that but still have a need. And so that's why our scale at the YW extends beyond that DSS platform.
I mean, I saw recent statistics that to raise a family of 2 kids comfortably around here required an income of over $200,000.
Right.
Yeah.
I was
Absolutely.
thinking that.
Absolutely. And
so these are people with jobs that make decent income. It could be a 2 income
Exactly.
family, and still struggling with
housing, car. But, another topic we've talked about is normalizing, and we need that space in childcare. And that comes out in paternity and maternity leave.
Absolutely.
Men being given paternity leave normalizes women needing maternity leave. Childcare is universal. Whether you're really wealthy or you're someone who needs support to afford the childcare, everyone who is a working parent may need some form of childcare. So making it universal that everyone is part of it normalizes it and makes everyone want to chip in for that.
Absolutely.
I did see another interesting statistic. I guess it's my day for statistics. According to the Society for Human Resource Management, which is known as SHRM, 62% of companies cite childcare as a reason they're seeing their employees leave. And I'm raising that with you, wondering if you see parents go, I just can't do this anymore. It'd be cheaper, better, easier for me to just stay home and do it myself.
Absolutely. I will share that I had a very, very solid and strong team member who left the YW because the child care for her 2 children was, they were not Westchester County residents, so they weren't able to take advantage of any of the supplemental resources that are offered. And it was just cheaper for them to stay home and pursue childcare in that particular area where they lived. So that definitely hit home and personal for me. But I'm seeing it throughout the industry that folks are rearranging, and not only are the women leaving, but some of the men are staying home and saying, you know what, I'll take this remote position. It's half day. I'll take care of the children during the day. So we are seeing a shift in that dynamic, not only of folks leaving, but who's leaving.
Right. And there's also, I hear a lot, grandparents taking on the responsibility of being the primary caregiver during the day.
Correct. And that goes to the earlier point of families becoming creative in meeting the child care need that they have simply because they can't afford it. But again, it comes at a cost, right? Those young people are not engaged in an environment with other learners. There are things that happen at that early childhood development stage that has to be undergirded with curriculum and exposure and sensory development that not all of us are credentialed to provide. And so when we shift and get creative with meeting that necessary need, it has a consequence.
And I'm sure that your staff picks up on things with the children that a parent might be blind to.
Absolutely.
And so seeing some type of learning issue, I remember I had a child that couldn't pump on the swing. I said, what? Who ever heard of something like that? Can't pump on the swing. But it was earmarked. I was able to get it evaluated, and it meant something.
Wow.
Developmental. And it takes the staff who are trained and observant to find things like that in their people.
What happens if there are greater needs? Can you deal with children on the spectrum who may need ABA therapy, or somebody who isn't able to walk? You know, you've had them since they're a baby, and it turns out that they can't walk, and something else is going on.
Good.
What do you do?
Good question. It definitely depends on the situation, because again, when you get to a diagnosis, that will require a skill set and expertise that a learning center may not be able to meet. And so this is where we either work with the local school district or with some local organizations to get that supplemental support into the YW. But there have been instances where we have not been able to meet the need of a particular diagnosis. And that's when we lean on our network of other providers, but then also advocacy agencies to help the families identify this is the place you want to go, so they don't have to deal with the runaround and try to figure out the why. Our team is definitely infused in a lot of those circles to ensure that we serve as a bridge with families if they have to transition because of a particular diagnosis.
I have to tell you, that is so meaningful. I had a child at a regular preschool and was supposed to go back the next year, and they had concerns about issues. But they made sure to get me in and get the services that were needed and get him into the preschool that they thought that could help him. And as a mother, that was just such a relief and so important. So, I don't want to minimize. I want people to understand what a big deal that is.
It's very stressful for a parent.
It
to
is
have
very
those
stressful.
issues.
And it's another vulnerable space.
Correct.
Because if you weren't diagnosed or haven't had that lived experience, and now you have to navigate this space with your child, it's important that you're connected with a resource that will connect you with other resources as well.
So another special situation that many people face is irregular hours, longer hours. Is there a way the Y can help with that? Is there, well, let's start with that part of the question.
Yeah, so it really depends. When we do our survey with our families and with our community, the 7-to-6 structure tends to work. What we find is that during the summer, they're looking for an alternative. Early child care is great, but although we offer Camp Funkus is a different fee-based experience. And so families are looking for some of that fun for their early childhood son or daughter. And so that's an area that we're looking to explore how we can integrate that. But the 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. pickup is very helpful for families because often many of them don't get off until 5, and being able to have staff there until 6 for pickup has been helpful. We do hear from our parents that date night is a challenge. And so one of the things that we're looking to explore with our membership experience is kind of the date night model where you drop your kids off for their own dry sip and paint, if you will, while the parents have date night. So we're looking to explore some of those pieces because, one of the things that I shared, if you are what you do, then when you aren't, you're not. And being the mother of a 28-year-old, when she went off to college, I realized for the last 18 years, I only knew myself as mom. And so if we could leverage our child care so that families cannot lose themselves in their relationships, or if it's a single parent that just wants time to be able to go to book club, that we create some of those opportunities that support that for them.
What about once your kid is school age, and you may have one that's younger and one that's school age? I mean, few jobs end at 3 if you've started at 9. does the Y, or is there a way to get coverage for that?
We do have our after school kids connection. Right now we do have some individual families that are part of that. We specifically target the school district so that families know through their communication systems that after school care exists just a stone throw away from their child's school. And Kids Connection has STEM curriculum, has art, has music. So it's not just drop your kid off at the Y and they're coloring sheets or watching TV. No, they're deeply engaged with their peers from other schools. So even if a parent has an only child that doesn't, get to interact with children regularly, here's a safe, fun, and affordable place to be able to do that.
And you've got swim and sports.
Listen, between swim and gymnastics, there's tons for our young people to do. And I know a lot of folks are like, oh, our young people are being reared in this digital age and all they know are tablets and iPhones. But there is a community center, whether it be the YW or a local community center, that you can look to engage your young person in some of these social spaces.
That's a really good question, though. What is your policy on screens? Do the children come in with phones, or do they have to leave them in the backpack? How does that work?
I will say when I'm coming through the back of the Y, because I walk through the building all the time, and what I observe is that our staff is so engaged because, we cover the generations of folks that serve our young people before, after school, and in our Children's Learning Center. They're so deeply engaged with each other that they're not even thinking about that particular
device. And with
device.
the children, do the children have a screen-free zone?
Oh, in our Children's Learning Center, absolutely. Screen-free for sure. We focus a lot more on the STEM and the arts and the music with what they engage in.
There's been a push that I've been reading about of trying to get businesses to provide, if not full-time childcare, at least emergency childcare. Do any collab with you for that kind of thing, or is that something that could be established?
Good question. That was actually one of my questions during, I believe, my interview process, is how have we leveraged our Children's Learning Center with some of the corporations that are proximate to us? Well, what I learned, some of them offer childcare themselves within their facilities. And so it's a matter of identifying where there may be a need with some of the corporations that are in downtown White Plains, or at least within a 20-minute commute from the Children's Learning Center, because that's the other thing that we have to think about. Families particularly want to be able to get to their child quickly in the event. Right. And so really looking at that radius and what's available in that area and making sure that they just know we exist and that we're there for their families.
So I have to ask what you see as the future of childcare. Are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. And here's why. We talk about there being a shortage of childcare workers because of the wages. What we don't talk about are the young people that have committed a life of service in education and development of young people. So I think it's important for us to really support our higher education institutions, from the community colleges to the four-year institutions that have really strong early childhood education programs, and create that pipeline. When one of the things that we're working on is building an opportunity for undergraduate students to get that student teaching experience. Yes, it should happen at the schools. It should also happen at the early childhood learning centers. Sure. And so strengthening that, I'm definitely hopeful, because I see that all is not lost with our young people. There are some that seek a life of service in a service to others. And so I am hopeful.
And now there's you. We invited you here, not just because of your expertise, but because you are a very interesting person.
Well, thank you.
And tell us what brought you to this space and how you came to Westchester.
What brought me to the space, I get a question often, what is it that you do for a living? And my response is I fight. And that sometimes makes people nervous. I'm like, no.
Maybe advocate.
Not physically, but I fight for advocacy and access, or fight for access and justice and equity. Because as a young person, there was always something in me that was cheering for the underdog, right? When someone caused harm to another person, it just brought me deep grief. And so I've just committed a life of service to others in advocating for access. I know the transformative power of education and what it did for me as a single mom, as a first generation college student. So I wanted to get in the system to figure out how to make it more accessible to others despite their situation or condition. Now, what brought me from Missouri all the way out east to do this work, you fall in love, you say I do, and you end up doing some crazy things like moving halfway across the country, but delighted that I did, because what it exposed me to is a greater opportunity to do this work in a region that was unfamiliar or foreign to me. And so I'm excited to be here to do this work through the different lenses that I've been able to do this work for the last 7 years now.
When we met to prepare for this interview, you said to me the following: whatever you choose to do not let that be the sum total of who you are. What does that mean to you?
Absolutely. As a woman, I have to tell you, we become indoctrinated to become the thing that we're doing. And for many of us, that's mother. For many of us, that's our career. But I remember going through a Leadership Development Institute, and I saw this quote: if you are what you do, then when you aren't, you're not. And that sent me on the journey to say, when I'm none of these things, what remains?
That is so important. Can
Absolutely.
you say it again?
Absolutely. If you are what you do, then when you aren't, you're not.
It's true for men and
True for
women.
men
Yep.
and women. So when I'm not mom, and heaven forbid, if I'm not wife, if I'm not CEO of the YW, who is she? And being able to answer that question allows me to move halfway across the country, allows me to move through different spaces and try new careers and try new things, because I'm not the sum total of all the things that I do.
Now, this is the balance dilemma. So
Yes.
we have to ask you what balance means to you, and can you have it all and all at the same time?
Regardless of how I prepared for that question, the answer has changed every time I thought of it. What does balance mean for me? Balance means that every day I give all that I can, no more than I should, understanding that tomorrow will be a new day. That's balance for me. Did I give all that I can? Did I give more than I should? Because if I did, I have to correct that tomorrow, and find joy in that tomorrow's a new day. Can we have it all? My family hates when I answer a question with a question. Should we have it all? Because if we do, then what becomes the pursuit? And so for me, I don't know that we should, and I don't know that we shouldn't, but I do know that we should continue to pursue whatever that is, whether that's the answer to the question of what's left when all those things are gone. But that's where I landed with that.
I'm going to write some of those down. Those are really good thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
This
This
has
is great.
been a wonderful conversation. Tell people where to find you or to find the why. We will put all of it in our show notes, but
Absolutely. You can check out the YWCA, www.ywcawpcw.org. That is also our handle on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
this has been a wonderful conversation. I hope we can continue it and work with you to
Yes.
find
Absolutely.
childcare
Tell us
solutions.
new things.
Absolutely.
We're
Thank you so
ready to
much.
promote. We love what you stand for.
Thank you so much.
And we, Christie and I, at The Balance Dilemma, would like to thank LMC Media. This podcast was recorded at their studio on the Avenue in Mamaroneck, New York. You can visit lmcmedia.org and book your time at their state-of-the-art podcast studio. It's walkable from the Mamaroneck train station, from the Metro North Mamaroneck train station. And you can also support this wonderful nonprofit media center at lmcmedia.org/donate. Thank you all for listening.
Please follow us, listen to us, and rate us on our platforms, Spotify, Apple, and our website, thebalancedilemma.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and email us your suggestions. There's no cost, but it means a lot to us.